American half pound of 2 pure beef patties, lettuce, tomato.
Singles going steady.
This is Singles Going Steady, the podcast dedicated to exploring great singles with a particular eye to the punk, new wave, and DIY eras of the last century. I'm Steve McGowan.
I'm Adrienne Meddock, and we're in a band, The Beef People, who released a single in 1986 on our own label, Zub Records. But we're also record collectors and passionate especially about the expression of pop music perfection that is the single recording. Exploring the mystery of what makes for a great single is what propelled us. Yeah, to begin this podcast. And this is episode of Singles Going Steady number
091.
And we're going back across the ocean.
Mm-hmm. We have a extremely good and really one of the classic punk singles ever by the Belfast, Ireland band Stiff Little Fingers, and their first single, Suspect Device.
Righteous Rage.
Oh, it's raging, that's for sure.
Yeah.
This is what you think of when you think of punk rock and political punk rock.
Yeah, this is harnessing
political and personal.
The horrors of the Troubles in Northern Ireland,
Right.
group from Belfast, Stiff Little Fingers.
Amazing band. Now, we have talked in the past about the Undertones from Derry, and they were involved in the Troubles. And when we say the Troubles, what are we talking about?
We're talking about the conflict between the Catholics and the Protestants
In Northern Ireland.
Right. Which is part of the United Kingdom,
which involved the British Army as well. And this is a subject a lot of Americans, especially the younger generations, really don't know a lot I mean, this was a war that was happening in our time.
Right. Horrible conflict. And I was very young when my family would travel to Chicago, where, of course, there's a large Irish population. And there would be a lot of Irish Republican Army graffiti in Chicago, pro-IRA graffiti. Of course, the unrest, the troubles, the conflict with a lot of acts of bombings and attacks on civilian populations by
the IRA,
by the IRA, and of course incredible violence visited by the Army, by the British Army as well. Just embroiled. I guess we weren't really going to turn into a discussion of the Troubles,
but it's important to know the framework that the single comes from and where these people are coming from. This really was a war that did have a lot of terrorist elements to it. There were a lot of bombs involved, places being blown up. Thus, suspect device. People were always being checked for devices. Right,
and viewing yourself, that a person, carrying that explosive anger, that a person is in fact a suspect device.
And that's how the lyrics of the song end, which is why it's such an amazing song, one of the many reasons. So, Stiff Little Fingers, an Irish punk band led by Jake Burns. This was 1978. They recorded it. They released 500 copies on their own Rigid Digits label. And
Get it, Rigid Digits, Stiff Little Fingers.
Yeah. And they were picked up by Rough Trade. They were one of the first bands on Rough Trade, which was just basically a record store in London, Jeff Travis's record store. And he started distribution of this single when they had a deal that fell through. And I think we should listen to it.
Yeah, let's listen to it.
Okay. From 1978, from Ireland, Stiff Little Fingers, and
from Northern Ireland. It's very
Suspect Device, indeed. So that's Suspect Device. That is a slice of rage, if I ever heard one. That is some righteous punk. The first copies they sent out to reviewers and record labels were packaged as a cassette.
Right.
And the apocryphal story is it was a lot of people thought it was a bomb.
Right. Because it looked
package,
like a cassette that was also had a fuse and of course bombs were not unheard of
in the mail,
traveling in the mail. Yeah, and one of the reasons I wanted to make it clear this is Northern Ireland.
Right.
This is under British rule.
Right.
So you've got an occupation or what is viewed as an occupation.
Some want the occupation, some don't.
Right. So there's this inherent conflict between those with English heritage and English privilege versus the native Irish folks.
Right. So John Peel, the famous DJ, caught on to this single, and he started to play it a lot. He did the same thing with the Undertones, and he really championed the band, championed the single. The thing about the Undertones was they made pop music in the face of the Troubles.
Right.
They didn't really... They were kind of escaping the Troubles by making music about chocolate and girls.
Right. And we discussed that a little bit in our Undertones.
Right.
My Perfect Cousin was the pod we did featuring a single by the Undertones. But, they really didn't take face, sort of head on.
That was their kind of punk stance, was to not talk about it. And while Stiff Little Fingers, it was their main subject was, there's a war going on outside my front door, and I'm going to write about it.
Right. It was inescapable, and sort of harnessing the rage and they started with that DIY ethos, right? That we have something to say, we're going to form a band, and we're going to scream it for the mountaintops.
Yep. So what do you think makes this a great single?
I think because it is so much of its time, because it shows sort of the power and the immediacy of punk.
Yes,
right?
I agree. I mean, when I hear this now, I'm like, I want to start a band. It's like, wow, this is what it's all about. You know?
And this really is a manifesto of what punk can be, right?
Yes.
So you've got people banding together in the face of incredible adversity to make a statement. To this is basically there's no First Amendment in the UK, but that freedom of speech, right?
Yes.
That here that this is a way to make that political speech one that reaches the kids, reaches everybody.
Yeah, it's it's a nasty sounding guitar riff, great bass playing, just straight ahead punk. There's nothing fancy about it. There's no weird arrangements. It's just as raw as it can be.
Right.
You can tell these guys who just picked up their instruments and they are ready to make some noise and ready to do what they want to do. And that's that DIY thing, like you just mentioned, that's really got a lot to do with it.
This is sort of like a time capsule of 1978.
Yes.
What was happening musically, what was happening politically,
right.
And how the two intertwined.
Right. Is it okay if I read just a couple of the lyrics?
Sure.
One of the lyric in the song is, "They take away our freedom in the name of liberty. Why can't they all just clear out? Why don't they let us be? They make us feel indebted for saving us from hell, and then they put us through it. It's time the bastards fell."
Right. So they were not equivocating on how they felt about what they viewed as an occupation.
And I think this is valid today. With a lot of the things that are going on. Some things never change.
Yeah.
So we had the.
We had the pleasure of seeing them. Is that where you were going to go?
Yeah, I was. Is that okay?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
I just have something to say about righteous indignation, but
I'll go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, that idea about some things never change, and certainly I think Jake Burns, who's later moved on to the U.S. and to Chicago,
lives in Chicago now.
And I was thinking about that connection about how Chicago, like Boston, there are enclaves that feel very close to the motherland, to Ireland.
Absolutely.
Of course, in Chicago, you've got lots of ethnic enclaves.
Yes.
But there in Chicago, when we saw them live, just a month and a half ago.
At the Cat's Cradle.
At the Cat's Cradle in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Did a great newer song that was based out of incredible pain and outrage. I don't even know how to describe.
I know.
The 16 shots that were fired into an unarmed black teenager.
McDonald.
Laquan McDonald.
Laquan McDonald, yes.
And he had a great song, 16 Shots. It really was, yeah. Right?
It was an amazing song.
And I was amazed by the quality of the songs, just sort of from a musical standpoint. And that here's someone who's still carrying the banner that punk is here to point out
to do
the wrongdoers, to call them out and to call them to task.
Yes.
And and the listener as well. Why are we not all outraged?
Right. Exactly.
Why are we not forming bands and calling out similar things?
Yeah, I think that's very well put. They are not a nostalgia act. They did do all of Inflammable Material because it's the 40th anniversary, but they played a bunch of new songs, and one was about depression. It was a very serious song. Jake struggles with depression, and then there was the 16 Shots song. He talked a lot about the Clash, about how they took the Clash as an inspiration.
Yeah, and I think the fact that the single was from '78, that these are folks. These are. This is like not first wave, but this is the first wave that followed the first wave. This is the first band that can form after,
they obviously heard the first Clash record.
And they immediately
moved on from that.
Moved on and started making their own personal statements.
And Stiff Little Fingers was also known. They toured with the Tom Robinson Band, who we've done a podcast about, an openly gay singer. Which was a big deal back in the 70s, the late 70s. They also played a lot of shows for the British Rock Against Racism movement, which was a big deal. They used to put on gigantic shows, and Stiff Little Fingers was always there. So they put their money where their mouth is.
So this is really about harnessing punk as a tool of awareness, a tool of social progress, of social awareness. It really does show the ability of punk as a uniter, and to spread the word.
So Stiff Little Fingers, they released their first record. It was called Inflammable Material, from the first line of Suspect Device, and it is a classic punk record. All the songs are about 2 minutes long. He mentioned when they were playing live that they just went into somebody's basement and they cranked it out, and it was the first record that was distributed on Rough Trade Records, which is kind of a famous label now. And then they were on Chrysalis for a little while. They released 2 excellent albums, one called Nobody's Heroes and one called Go For It. And I got both of those records from our keyboard player, Ken Norton. He was way ahead on that tip on Stiff Little Fingers. Let me borrow his records and listen to them. And they're both good. They have a little bit more of a pop sensibility, but the topics that Jake writes about are, there's football hooliganism, there's, all kinds of deep things going on, and great music, great music. And he developed a sense of melody that is very strong, while still keeping it pretty punk.
Yeah.
And they would do your occasional reggae type cover like the Clash as well. So very successful, very interesting band. I still think this is one of the best singles that came out of the punk era.
I think you're right.
I think it gets overlooked a lot because you think about the Pistols and the Clash and the Damned, but just because they were from Ireland didn't mean they weren't able to put together something, like you said, that really means.
Yeah, this is meaningful.
A call to action.
It's smart. It's sensitive, but but that doesn't give up melody.
Right.
anger,
Right.
and just in your faceness to make up a term, right?
Exactly.
I mean, this is confrontational.
Yeah, you can't avoid it. When this comes on the turntable, it's like, wow, what is that? What's that racket?
Yeah. I mean, it's true that a bomb did go off
Yes.
when they passed around
Yes.
but it's a different type of sort of a musical call to arms.
Yep. All right, Stiff Little Fingers. Do you hear anybody doing this song?
Oh, well, I don't know that anybody's got the
anger and the righteousness.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. The only thing I was thinking of is I hear a lot of bands they influenced sound-wise, and one of them is probably Minor Threat.
Okay.
Even though they're considered a hardcore band, they had that kind of really rough and tumble punk sound at the beginning.
I could hear that.
And I'm sure that they were listening to Stiff Little Fingers.
Yeah.
I could hear someone like that. It would be very similar, I think, if they did it. So, and not a big step.
Right,
But,
right. I think you're right there.
Yeah. Do you have a recommendation?
Ooh, do I have a recommendation? Well, we're recording these around the end of the year in 2019.
Right.
And I have been making a lot of trail mix as gifts.
Delicious trail mix.
Yeah. So, I encourage you to experiment with sort of that crafting homemade gift.
Yeah.
Something edible is always good so that you're not having to
and it's not like you're making
glue your fingers
pastries
to
or anything.
Right.
you know.
It is definitely, food that other people have made that you're just combining in diabolical ways.
And very tasty ways.
Yeah, go for that salt and sweet and something a little crunchy and something, with a little bit of fat to it, and you've got trail mix and you're doing well.
So my recommendation is food related as well. This is a show we've been watching on the History Network, and what's it called again?
It's the food that made America.
The food that made America, and it's very dramatic.
Oh, it's got the best live live actors reenacting Milton Hershey and his sidekick and
famous moments in Eminem's career, and it's actually kind of interesting.
It really is. It's interesting the sort of mass marketing of food and sort of mass production of food.
It's all about the history of America. Like the one we were watching had a whole bunch of stuff about Colonel Sanders and him tying his shoes. And how his
have
restaurants
film they use over and over and over.
How his restaurants grew with the interstates going up, and same with McDonald's, and how Ray Kroc bought/swindled the McDonald brothers out of their franchise and their speedy delivery, and it's very interesting, and it's very amazing to see how these people made so much money. Didn't they say the Mars family is still like the third richest family in America?
I think the Mars family,
yeah. So go chocolate.
Yeah, but the story of sort of mass marketing of food is really tied into the economic engine of the United States. So it's interesting to it's a fairly uncritical look.
Right.
It's not exactly like the Marxist retelling of the history of the American food system. Right. But it's very interesting to look at this particular slice of history, even as it's got a little bit of rose-colored tint to it. But look at taking that one single type of industry.
And I've enjoyed it. It's kind of a guilty pleasure, and there's nothing wrong with that. So anyway, we've gone from Northern Ireland to food in America. So this is obviously Singles Going Steady. We've had a great, amazing punk single today. The band Stiff Little Fingers and Suspect Device.
With a little bit of it's the 2 cent discussion of the troubles in Northern Ireland. Definitely
we'll put some links up.
View of that, but we'll put links.
We'll put links, so if you're interested in what was going on, you can check that out, and you should be.
Yeah, but kids, if you're writing a term paper on the troubles, do not cite this.
Yeah, please, no. So that's it for us today. We will talk to you very soon. Thanks for listening with us, and have a great day.
Yes, soon.
Bye.
To learn more about the artists and recordings we just talked about, visit our website at zubrecords.com and click on the Singles Going Steady icon.
You'll also find links to the persons, places, and things we recommend, and much more.
You can find episodes of Singles Going Steady on our website or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
Singles Going Steady is brought to you by the power and majesty of Zub Records.
Zub Records. Smart sounds for sharp people.